So we're the Society for Conservation Biology Florida chapter, and this is our fourth general body meeting. We have a speaker at the end of our short announcements, but yeah, we will get started now. So for anyone who's new here, we are SCB Florida chapter, and our mission is to promote the dissemination of conservation science, especially the research being done here at the University of Florida, but also we have been reaching out to a lot of awesome conservation related professionals as well. And yeah, so we do our bi-weekly general body meetings with a bunch of different people like researchers, conservationists, other people talking about their research and efforts for conservation. And then we also have volunteer events and a lot of socials. So and then a brief introduction to our officers. We have them lined up here. So there's Anushka and Kaylee and Lexi and Grace. And I am Michelle, the president. Yeah, so we have Lexi talking about something.
Yeah, hey guys, so I'm the historian. I kind of run the social medias. Just make sure you're connected with us. We post events on Facebook, but also all of that stuff is on the Instagram. That's a good way to kind of keep up with what we're doing. There will always be posts about what GBMs and events are coming up. And if you have any pictures from any of the events that we go to, you can feel free, please, to send them to me through GroupMe. I can give you my number if you want. You can also DM the Instagram page with those pictures. Additionally, so I'd like to kind of start to do more with what our members are involved in conservation. So if you have a cool conservation story, or you had a cool internship or job or volunteer opportunity, whatever, you can send me some of those photos with a small little blurb. A couple of sentences is fine. And I'll make sure to get those posted on the page to kind of highlight you and your story. And then also I'm trying to get better about if anybody tags the account in their wildlife photos or anything of that nature, reposting that up onto the story. So yeah, definitely connect with us on social media. It's a fun way to get your name out there, connect with other people.
Great. I'm Grace. I'll be talking about our point system really quick. It's very simple this semester. We have our GBMs and then our other event categories. You just need to come to 3 GBMs over the course of the semester and 2 of our other events like socials or volunteering. And that will qualify you for things like our end of semester trip and our merchandise.
I'm back. So yeah, so we have a funding for if you want to be a part of the International SCB organization. It's just a global network of professionals and researchers who are in the field, and you get to have a few perks like being a part of the having the newsletter, and then if you're interested in their conferences, you get some discounts, and then they have some student awards as well. So if you're interested, that form should be on the link that is sent out. So yeah, that is all.
All right. Hello. If you've been here a little while, you probably know me already. My name is Kaylee, and I'm the event coordinator. So I know we've been kind of lacking with events. Please, I'm very sorry. This week has been very rough for me, but we've been doing pretty good with our volunteering. So if you've been going out to Luby, thank you. Great. If you have been, please fill out that form I sent in the GroupMe. But other than Luby, we were planning to have a hiking social at Sweetwater this Saturday, but I know it's the weekend of homecoming, so there will be a interest form sent out, and it's basically going to be us deciding whether we want to have it this Saturday, October 9th, or next Sunday, which is October 17th. Other than that, we're actually going to be having a movie social on October 16th, which hopefully it's not too personal for y'all, but it is going to be taking place at my apartment. So if you're interested in getting to know us in a more intimate setting, and we're going to have cookies and we're going to watch movies, and I have a projector, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're also going to be going to Luby Bat Fest on October 23rd, and there will be a form coming out shortly for that if you are interested. We're also planning a Halloween craft night on the 30th. I know it's very close to Halloween, but if you could make it out, that would be awesome. It's going to be great. But thank you all for listening to me. And yeah.
Our next GVM is October 19th at 7 p.m. It's in this room, so if you made it here, congrats. You know where to go next time. If you're on Zoom, it'll still also be on Zoom, but we might have technical difficulties, so bear with us. It's always hard. We also, if you were at our last meeting, Dr. Hull talked about a few study abroad opportunities, and we got some more information. So Dr. Fletcher's South Africa opportunity is here. It's also linked in that link sent in the chat. They're requesting all information to be submitted by October 11th, which is next Monday. And then they'll start interviewing applicants the week of the 25th. So submit soon if you plan to do it. And we will, if we get more information about the China opportunity, we will also send it out to you guys. Awesome. And then here's just a list of some of our speakers we have lined up for the future. So we have someone on shark conservation, wildlife disease ecology, and orangutan, plural, yeah. And then we're also planning a bonus GBM with the Office of Sustainability. But now it is time to welcome tonight's speaker, Bridget San Marco and Christina with Save the Giants. They'll be talking about giant river otters. So take it away.
Hello. Can you guys see us? Oh, now I see it. Okay, cool. So we have a fun little video about the project that I was going to share my screen and play. And then more I'm hoping is we'll have like discussion with everybody. And I want to know like more questions that you guys have and if we can get some fun discussions going versus me sitting here and talking and lecturing to you because you guys get lectured in college enough. You don't need me doing it too. A little bit less formal. So are you guys all right if I share my screen? Perfect. This one. Okay, my privacy settings. Let me get my tech support husband one.
So while we wait, does anyone have a fun story about their week yet to share? No? Okay. What?
I said I took an exam this morning. That's all I got.
Nice, me too. That's not a fun story though.
Good job.
Y'all did great though. A reminder, there is pizza. Please have our pizza. It's for you guys. So we did eat a decent chunk of it. Nice. So relevant.
Feel like able to share her screen.
I think there's some privacy issues going on. We'll figure it out. I promise.
So that link right there on the board.
Oh. Oh my gosh, it's happened. We can't hear it very loudly. Very muffled. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that.
It's just music in the background. So
Oh, okay.
All right, so that was like a really broad overview of what we do during all our work with Save the Giants. So first of all, I'll open it up. Has anybody heard of giant otters before? Yeah. Do you know that there's 13 different species of otters? No, okay. Most people think sea otter, they think North American river otter, sometimes, Asian small clawed otters because you see them in zoos, but not often do we talk about giant otters. They're the longest out of all 13 species. They're from South America. So Christina, we work with giant otters almost exclusively in Guyana in South America. So Christina, you want to talk about the origins of the project real quick?
Sure. Hey guys, how's it going? That video got me like a little sad. It's been a hot minute since we've been able to go into the field. We were going like 2 to 3 times a year, and in November it'll be 2 years since we've been. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been tough. But so I used to be a zookeeper at Zoo Atlanta here in Atlanta where I'm at, and I applied for a keeper grant to go out of the country and study the giants in Guyana in 2016. So I went down there. I absolutely fell in love with the culture, the people, the animals, of course. And a year later, I was putting together Save the Giants as kind of a grassroots organization because there's really no if you Google giant otter conservation, you will find, I guess, us is pretty much like it. If you Google like rhino conservation, tiger conservation, you're going to get a whole slew of different organizations to choose from. And, we were very underrepresented in the animal kingdom. So I thought, well, shit, the otters need representation too. And then I found Bridget, and it's been love ever since then. We've been going strong since 2016. And even through the pandemic, we weren't in the field, but we have a team of, we did have like 7 people, and now we're kind of like a skeleton crew. But we did manage to fundraise and keep our guys paid all throughout the pandemic. So we kept the work going despite everything that was going on. So yeah.
Since you guys are a conservation club and you're looking at all that different stuff, right now we have friends who review grants, and everything coming in right now because of the pandemic is we weren't able to get any work done due to the pandemic. We weren't able to get any work done. No research is being done. We have no idea where the status is of different projects. So one of the discussion points I wanted to lead into, but we can jump into it now since we're on topic. It was creating a robust conservation program, because eventually you guys are going to be done with school and are you guys going like specifically out into conservation? Is that your goal? Yeah, so I'm also a zookeeper. So I work at Moody Gardens. I work with the giant river otters there. And then on top of that, this is my unpaid second dream job. So I get to do conservation as well as working with the animals in zoos. So I'm going to derail and then jump back because I think like an otter and I jump around. So I apologize. But essentially, zoos and aquariums do some of the most conservation work for worldwide for species and habitats through species survival programs, which for giant otters, that means because I work at an accredited zoological facility, we work with all of the accredited zoological facilities in the world to ensure 90% genetic variability for the next 100 years for every otter pup born. That way, if they go extinct in the wild, it's like an insurance plan of genetically valuable otters that we can eventually do reintroductions with. However, that has to work hand in hand, because if we deplete their resources in the wild and we destroy their habitat, there's nowhere to go. So you can't release otters into habitat that can't support the otters that are already there. So on top of that, you also have to do on the ground boots work, conservation, protecting their ecosystems and their habitats. So I'm very fortunate that I get to do both. So I can do work on the ground as well as working with those insurance plans of making sure that otters, giant otters specifically, are around for a very long time. So now jumping back, so that was a little intro of what I do, but jumping back, we're talking about our robust conservation program. So with Save the Giants, we wholeheartedly believe in involving the local community in everything you do. The number one thing of it is the only ones that are paid are our Indigenous community members who we've trained to do population surveys. We've trained to do wildlife clubs and educational outreach with kids in the village, as well as other adults in the village as well. And they're the ones who we do all the fundraising for, as well as equipment. We take no money for ourselves. It's all towards supporting local, essentially it's a local business to protect all the animals down there. So that's why throughout the whole pandemic, we were able to still do population surveys. We were still able to we had our intern in the field going around to people's houses and just dropping off books so the kids can still do some literacy reading and some other different things throughout the pandemic when they can't get together. So I think that set us apart from a lot of other conservation organizations worldwide, that we were able to still get some stuff done. It wasn't to the same extent that we were doing, but the project was still moving along. We still have data, we still have growth in our project, just as not as much growth as we would have liked. But that's one thing that I want to hit home and drive home to all of you guys is involving the locals, which brings me to my next discussion point that I want you guys to start thinking about, and it's politics. So when I was in college and I wanted to do conservation, I went to Florida Institute of Technology, so not too far away from you guys. But I don't like politics. I never thought that conservation was going to be all about politics. But also when you're working with animals that are not in the area where you live, you have to think who's voting. So who is going to be the ones creating and making the changes that are going to protect their habitat and their environment? Do you want to jump in, Christina? You're muted.
Oh no, I was shushing the people in my house. No, you're good.
So yeah, I don't like politics, but depending on who you're talking to, that's why we include the locals too, because the locals are going to be the one making the change and coming up with plans and how they're going to use their land and their resources. So again, reaching out to the locals. And now I'm going to stop talking for a little bit, and I want you guys to ask questions and then see what you think about some of the different topics we were just talking about.
Has anybody been into the field to do any conservation work yet? No. I mean, I'm kind of in that same boat. When I first was in college, I was on a science track and biology, and this is exactly what I wanted to do, work with animals, participate in some kind of conservation initiative. And now at 40, since I have been running a conservation initiative, I constantly say, and I think, Bridget, we talk about this a lot in group meetings about how, why didn't they teach us this in college? If I had have known this, I wouldn't have done this. And I just think the world of conservation is so complex, as Bridget already said about politics. I know when I first went down to study the giants, there was no discussion about the local people and how critical it was to involve them in the process. But once I, started actually working in the field and experiencing, this incredibly different world from my own, I realized it's all about the people. The animals are wonderful and we love them, and ultimately that's what we're trying to save. But you can't really start a project hoping to just focus on a species, because I think that's where we're really missing the mark in conservation, is we are not involving the local people, and not just involving them in decision making. Of course, you always want to, get their input, and Indigenous knowledge is also critical alongside of scientific knowledge. But even, you have to think in terms of paying them for the knowledge that they're giving you, the services they're giving you. And yeah, I think in order for us to move forward with conservation, if we really do want to make it successful, we have to, think of it in more of a One Health approach than we are right now. So
yeah, so we had some examples because there's very big overview of the project in that video and how we use a One Health approach. So the reason why we focus on giant otters isn't just because Christine and I both worked with them in zoos, fell in love, and there was no project for them. It's because they are an indicator species. They're highly sensitive to pollution. So they're like a canary in the coal mine if something's going on in that whole ecosystem. And they're a bigger animal, easier to study, which is halfway joking because it's very hard to find them if you don't know how to find them. We usually smell them first before we find them. And then, yeah, so they're highly sensitive to pollution and they're top predators. So if they're around, you know, the fish populations are doing well enough. And if the fish populations are doing well enough, everything else in that river ecosystem is doing well. And then on top of that, because they're so sensitive to pollution and they hold down territories, they will abandon their territory if the waterways become polluted. So just by looking at presence or absence, we know if the water is clean, safe for not just the otters and the fish, but also the humans that live around it too. Because in a lot of these communities, there is no water testing. They are fishing out of those rivers, they're bathing in those rivers, that is their drinking water. It just gets pumped directly to their house. There's no filtration systems. So they need to know that it's safe for their family too. We tell them if you have otters around, that's good. But if they up and leave one day, call Indigenous Affairs and ask them to come and test the water. That's your first sign that maybe something happened upstream and you need to look at your water. So that's the main reason why we focus on giant otters, but we also are protecting jaguars. We're protecting all the birds, all of the fish, all of the reptiles and amphibians and everything else around that ecosystem too, just by focusing on otters because they tell us so much. And then, what else did you want to talk about, Christine? We're getting into Indigenous versus scientific knowledge, and I love that topic, and I think it's really worth sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just gonna kind of snowball. Does anybody have any questions yet? Anybody else wanna give everybody a chance to ask questions if they have any? No.
We structured this so it would be just like discussion. So please ask questions.
So is your project solely funded through fundraising efforts, or do you apply for grants like annually to pay the Indigenous people doing that field work for you?
So we have received grants here and there, a handful of grants over the past 6 years, and they're mainly just small grants. Everything is under 10,000 that we receive, which is enough to sustain our project because it is small. But as with any kind of project, you want to set long-term goals, 5-10 years. And we are looking to expand the scope of our reach in the village. So currently before COVID hit, we were on track to build a science and technology center in the village to provide access to computers, to equipment. So we could not only do testing of like fecal samples of the otters, but so we could also help the Indigenous people with like domestic pet health, host big conferences. So yeah, we were actually looking for bigger pots of money for the science center. But right now, everything has gone back to Bridget raises a lot of money for us in her gift shop at Moody Gardens. She sells t-shirts and she does otter encounters, which bring in a lot of money. So that kind of revenue is really what is sustaining us so we can pay our guys in the field every month. So yes, we're very small and we're either doing personal fundraisers, begging on social media, or yeah, the few lucky either private grants we get or through zoos. And
Yeah.
sorry, but just
For
for grants are really hard, and I'm sure you guys all know that they're really difficult. We're not a brand new group, so when we apply for grants and they see that we've been going since 2016, what do you think one of the first questions they ask is? If you're a scientific grantor that has money and they see a science organization that's been in the field running research for 6 years, they say, where are your papers? What have you written? What have you published? Because, you know, in the science world, the data is really important. So currently, Bridget's husband is a techno genius, and he has built us this giant otter database, which we are currently plugging all of our camera trap data, all of our GPS points into this mega database that will allow us to crunch numbers, analyze, the otter population of the surveyed area that we have been conducting for the past 6 years. And that will allow us to actually publish data. And so then we can start, we're hoping that we can build on the small grants that we have been given over the past few years and start applying for those bigger grants of, upwards of 10,000.
Another thing that I want to add, because Christina didn't touch on it, but because we work so closely with the Indigenous community, we want them to be the authors. So it takes us a little bit longer to write a paper because we're trying to get back and forth in an area that doesn't have internet reliably at all. And we want them to be the ones, this is their home, these are where their otters essentially are. They're the ones that this information is going to mean a lot to because it's going to potentially change land use decisions for where they live. So we want them to be the ones doing the majority of it. So it takes us a little bit more time than another project who just goes in for a quick survey, does a paper, churns it out. It's like, okay, done, moving on to the next thing. So we're there for the long haul. We're there to do a really long-term study and make sure that we're in a good spot. The reason why we went to Guyana versus Brazil or some of the other different areas where giant otters are found is because Guyana is their last stronghold. And they're also extremely understudied there. All the papers that everybody writes in the scientific community says there's only 35 giant otters in Guyana, which we know is bullshit. Sorry for my language. We see 35 otters in a day sometimes. It's just one person went down, did a rapid river survey, only saw 35 otters, published the paper. So that means a lot of those resources for grants would be going to Brazil or somewhere else or Peru, because there's somebody down there doing a more long-term study or the populations are higher. So there's more people to report that information versus where it's untouched, beautiful habitat that now oil companies are coming into and all these other different things. And they're looking at paperwork that says there's 35 otters in the country. So that's why it's also really important to really look at where you're going, where's your study site, and what are your true goals for the long haul.
Yeah, and I would also piggyback on what Bridget's saying in terms of working with the Indigenous people. It's also really important in the field, and this is something that we talk about a lot, is collaboration. For some reason, egos in the conservation world, as you know, animal people can be really weird and get a little bit egotistical with their work, and it's kind of like a don't tread on my territory. And we've never really thought that way. We've always thought well, the more the merrier, right? Because we can't do this by ourselves. It's just too much to tackle. So we have teamed up with another organization in the field, and their focus is on vector-borne diseases from mosquitoes. So mosquitoes live in water, breed in water. And so this group is, they have the capacity to use all this high-tech drone equipment and these weather stations, and their monitoring capacity is much bigger than ours. So we've teamed up with them to use their technology, and they've teamed up with us to learn how to work with the community and talk to the people, because that's what we're good at. And so conservation, it's so much, the picture is so big that you identify your weaknesses and your strengths, and then you work with others to kind of come together and make it happen.
Do you guys have any other questions?
Yes, please ask away.
Oh, I see one in the back. I saw a hand.
You unmute.
Okay, yeah. So my question is, have you guys had any struggles kind of with the language or culture barrier? And if so, how have you overcome those?
That's a really good question. And another really wonderful thing about working in Guyana is that their language is English. So for the most part,
not wonderful.
For the most part, they speak English, but there's definitely local languages for each community. And so when we're going down the river and we're like, hey, have you seen otters? They'll look at you and you'd be like, water dog. And they're like, oh, water dog up that way. So knowing what they call them. And then there's definitely for the most part, where we're at, everybody speaks English, but we did go, Christina and another member at the time went to Peru for a conference, and we were representing all of Guyana, and then the whole conference was in Spanish. So that was a challenge for us. For sure. And then when we had all the instructions on all the data we had to submit before the conference to tally up, we were trying to make a big like global picture of what giant otters are doing all over all of their range countries. It was hard because it was in about 3 different languages. So it was in Spanish, Portuguese, and English. So there's definitely challenges with that, but luckily you find people who know different languages and you can translate.
But it is that is actually a really good question and a big concern that you should always have on your radar is respecting local languages because that's a fundamental way that we communicate. So last November 2019, we held a big workshop in the village, and we had a great turnout. But some of the people in the village have never really learned how to speak proper English, so they rely on the local dialect called Makushi. And it's a very small language. There's no written text because we have wanted to actually study the language so we could pick up key words, so we could do some, light communication in the language. However, since there's no written text, we were thinking, that's like super unfortunate. So we actually were going to hire somebody in the village to start translating all of our texts that we have about giant otters and our talks that we give into Makushi, so that we could preserve some of the language and then use what they translated to actually reproduce and give to the neighboring villages who definitely don't speak any English. So yes, our work just kind of like snowballs over time, and we just pinpoint all these different issues that need to be addressed, and definitely language and the preservation of a language is very important.
Thank you. We have another question back here.
Hi, so I know you guys were talking a lot about how you're kind of like itching to get back in the field, and I know a bunch of us, including myself, who are like going through school right now, are like really want to get that experience in. And I was wondering if you knew of like any opportunities for students like us who are really trying to get out there, but it's really hard right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in 2019, we took a group of 14. It was a huge international trip. We had people from Mexico, Scotland. Where's Joe? Joe was
Paraguay.
Paraguay, yes. But we also took a bunch of zookeepers from the U.S. So it was an amazing opportunity for everybody. The fees, we kept it relatively affordable, but the fees that everybody pitched in allowed us to, pay the village and, just keep the money in the village, which is really important. But it's kind of a form of ecotourism. So we really would love to put together another trip where we take students down. That was actually a big discussion for us and one of our big initiatives moving forward. But of course, COVID totally shut all of that down. It's a really tricky scenario for us because we do want to be socially responsible and not take any sort of like weird variant into this village of 1,000 people that could potentially expose them. Half of the village is vaccinated. Their political vibe there kind of mirrors what's going on in the US right now. It's like half of them were totally on board and excited to get vaccinated. And then the other half, there's a stigma that the vaccine is the mark of the beast, and, this deep-rooted religious fear that, they shouldn't be taking the vaccine. So we're faced with a situation that's really precarious because they do live in a vacuum there. And if one person is exposed, then you're potentially exposing this entire village, which is not fair to them.
And on top of that, they don't have the same medical care that we do here. It's very remote. So even though if any of us get sick, you can walk 5 minutes in any direction probably and find an urgent care or some sort of area that you can get assistance, like a pharmacy. That's not an option down there. So we have to be responsible, not just like, even though we're all vaccinated and you guys might be vaccinated, so we might have a group that we feel is safe. It's not safe for that location.
Well, and also the safety of you guys is absolutely paramount as well. And in Guyana, their response to an outbreak in the interior, the village where we go, would be just to shut everything down. And they don't care if you're American and need to get home. You know, if they shut it down, they shut it down. We had an intern in the field he was supposed to stay for a year. We pulled him out at 6 or 7 months, I think.
I think he was a little bit longer, but yeah.
Yeah, so we had to pull him out due to COVID because the country did shut down, and we had to charter a private jet from where was it? Somewhere in Europe to go and get him, like physically extract this child and get him home to Scotland. So we're in kind of PTSD mode from that experience. It drained the bank account. Of course, his safety was critical and his family was worried, so we did get him out. But we don't want to put anybody in a situation where there's a group of us stranded in the middle of the Guyanese jungles because, you know, a COVID outbreak happens and the country goes red.
But
So
before the pandemic happened, that was one of the growing spots that we wanted to do. I was trying to set up with my zoological facility that I'd be able to take members onto field trips with me. And then what they would pay would all support conservation in the project, and as well as covering their costs and contributing to the village. So it's something that hopefully in the future we can get to again. But right now, globally, we all have to look at what's in front of us and say, okay, how can we still continue to do the root and the heart of this project and still keep going until we get to a point where it's safe to do all of our big plans again. Which is going back to trying to create a robust conservation initiative that can withstand global pandemics, because even though this was a big one, it's not going to be the last. So unfortunately, we just know that that's where we're at in the world with the way we are in everything, everywhere. It's going to happen again. So you got to plan for it now for your future plans. I would say for any conservation group, they should have a pandemic plan in place going forward.
Yeah, for sure. And we do actually want to put another intern in the field at some point, maybe next year at some point we could get somebody down there. And it's a great opportunity. Our intern really loved it. We thought we were never going to get him to be able to leave. We kind of had to force him. He just kind of took to it and he did a great job. So that is something that we would like to pursue in the future, is getting an intern. And we would like to make it so it works with your school in your classes, so that you will be able to develop a program where you could get class credit for that internship. So
for living in the field for a year, doing research and outreach,
would love to do, right? But
I'm like, can I be our intern?
Exactly. But yeah, I would encourage everybody to email us and kind of stay in touch. And as soon as we feel like it's safe and responsible, we will definitely head back down. We
also follow our Facebook page. We update that way more than our website. And if we're getting ready for a trip or we're getting ready to do anything, like we're moving forward in that direction again, we will be posting about it on our Facebook page. And if you're interested in tagging along, message us.
Sure.
Do you guys have any other questions? If not, I have another. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I just kind of had a general biology question, or maybe a couple of them. Sorry if you covered this, or I can just look it up. But so how long are the otters? How long do they live? And can they get coronavirus?
Yeah, excellent questions. So giant otters are the longest out of all 13 different species. We're really good in the otter biology world of naming otters. So sea otters live in the sea. North American river otters, they're in North America. Giant otters, they're the longest. So 6 feet from tip of nose to tip of tail for the males. The females get about 5.5 feet, but there is variation between them. It's not like they all get to that size. So I work with several giant otters over my career, and I've seen a running occurrence of the males being smaller than the females, but it's not necessarily like hard and fast true rule. Their lifespan in the wild is an average of about 13 years. In a zoological setting, it's their early 20s, late teens, early 20s. just because they don't have all the pressures that you have in the wild. They have vet care, they like all of the above. There's never going to be a jaguar on exhibit with them. People aren't poaching them, all the great stuff. So that's why they can live longer in zoological care. And then what was the other question? Oh, coronavirus. So yes, giant otters are susceptible to coronavirus. They have an almost identical ACE2 cell receptor to humans, which is where COVID binds. So they can absolutely get COVID-19, which is another reason why we have to be really careful around all of the otters, not just in our zoological care, but all of our people in the field. So we're making sure that they're not getting close to their dens. They're not getting close to their latrines. They're just staying in their boat, going down and collecting. They're wearing masks the entire time. They're not touching anything that they shouldn't be touching because they absolutely can get COVID. That's another part of our One Health approach and why we do domestic pet clinics, because not just the humans, but also you think about their dogs that go down and go to the river with them too. They could be potentially bringing distemper or parvo or a lot of other different diseases into the wild animal community as well. So if we can be doing these quick little minute clinics, essentially when we go down, bringing veterinary equipment with us, having everybody bringing their dogs, we'll give them baths for their mange, we'll make sure that they get dewormed and all their vaccinations that they need. We can even set up, if we bring vets with us, to do a spay and neuter clinic. All of that is protecting the wildlife, because if you are protecting human health as well as your domestic animal health, you're protecting the wild animal health at the same time. So that's part of our One Health approach. So it's taking care of the people, taking care of their pets, taking care of the wildlife. Good questions. I love these questions. Keep them coming.
I'm behind the camera, so you won't be able to see me.
That's
But,
fine.
was setting up a One Health approach like difficult when you got there, or like was it not as hard as I think it would be?
No,
So I think it just builds and builds. So yeah, it's real hard. It starts
really
with
hard.
one thing and then you realize, oh, we got to tackle this. This is a problem. Oh, we need to tackle this now. And it just keeps more and more things getting on your plate.
Yeah, every single move we make is weighted. Whether, I mean, it just is. You know, our intern fell in love with a Guyanese woman, and it was this huge 2-week long discussion about whether this was ethical, or, you know, it just every single decision you make is has to be heavily weighed from every single angle, because you can offend villagers, you can leave villagers out, you can be biased towards a certain group of villagers and then upset them. And the more you work in the field, the more you become very sensitive and cognizant of all the different lives and opinions that are filtering into your project and how much you affect, because we can't hire everybody in the village, which is ideally what everybody would like to see happen, because we pay well. They can depend on us because we've been there for so long, but unfortunately we can't do that. So we can only hire a select few, and it does cause problems. You know, people say, well, why can't I have a job? And it creates animosity, and then some people will act out and they'll steal equipment or damage field equipment just out of spite, or just, you know, because they might not have as much as somebody else. So it's just a way for them to try to make easy money. You know, we could go on and on and on forever, but yes, so the One Health approach, it gets easier, I think, as you go along, but it is very difficult. Yes, things that you think may be hugely beneficial to the village may turn out not to be.
I think it's critical for any long-term project. So if you're just going in to write a research paper real fast and get out, and you're just looking at one thing, okay. But if you're going to be somewhere for a long period of time, you should really be doing a One Health approach and looking at the whole picture and everything going on. Because just like when anything you're studying, there's no one right answer. If there was one right answer, we wouldn't have these mass extinction events that's happening right now. It's really easy to be like, oh, for like some of the threats to giant otters. One is hydroelectric dams, which you might think, well, that's a really great idea because it's clean energy source. However, it's limiting migratory fish species from getting into their habitats because the otters hold down a territory and therefore it's cutting down on their food supply. So there's not one right answer. Now, some of the otters do fine living around the hydroelectric dams and others don't. Depends on how sensitive that family group is. And then there's other different things we could go on and on about too, like overfishing. So there's mining communities that brought in new technologies to this community. And by new technology, I mean refrigeration that they could have on their boat. So that way they can catch more fish at a time. So they can not just supply for themselves, but also the mining communities. And so they can outfish what they've ever been able to do before because they can store more with refrigeration, which is something that we don't think about. We're like, oh, it's a great idea. Do that and help out this community who's here temporarily. But at big picture, it's not doing so hot. Another thing that I really like to talk about, especially in this type of setting, is for one of the giant otters threats is climate change. Because a lot of the discussion about climate change has historically been about the poles and the melting ice caps. But in South America, in giant otter land habitat, they have a rainy and a dry season. So you think about rainforest, rainy season, dry season. During the rainy season, it should rain enough that it completely floods the rivers and then floods the neighboring savannas. And during that time, all the fish are breeding in the grasses of the savannas. And then as the dry season comes, it restocks the river with way more fish because they've been able to successfully breed during the rainy season. Now with global climate change and changing weather patterns, what we're seeing is the rains are not coming at the right times. They're maybe not getting enough, or they're too much, or it's all out of whack. So it's throwing off the reproduction cycles of the fish. So then you don't have, I compare it to like trying to, shoot fish in a bucket. So the otters, when the dry season is happening, the rivers should be stocked more heavily. Not that there's more fish, it's just in a smaller area. And that's when their pups are coming out of the den and learning how to fish, because it's easier for them to catch fish because there's more fish abundant in a smaller space. So if that's also throwing off the amount of fish in a given area, and then it's also throwing off the otters and how many pups they can have survive, because how many pups can successfully get fish. So global climate change affecting everything, and it's throwing off those rain cycles, which is bad news bears. It's not good. So it's something that we also look at, not necessarily with ourselves, but with some of the projects that we've teamed up with and we collaborate with, and we say, hey, this is what we're seeing with otters. What are you seeing with this? And then what are you seeing with giant anteaters? And what are you seeing with macaws? Because when you're in a small little area like that, it's beautiful, rich in biodiversity, you run into a lot of other projects and we can all help out each other. So collaborate, make friends. Then when they're out looking for birds and they see an otter, I'm like, hey, just take a GPS point and we'll put it in our database. So then they can help us when we're in different areas, and we can be out looking for otters, see something they're interested in, collect data for them, submit it to them, make friends in the field.
Yeah, and another thing that we have actually seen in real time with when you talk about climate change and messing up the seasons and fish stores, you talk about lack of resources, and competition between humans and otters starts to really ramp up. So there's a human animal conflict. And I was down there in 2016. There was an El Nino, and it was just a severe drought, and there was very little fish in the river. And so you saw humans and otters literally fighting over fish. The otters were raiding their fishing nets, taking the fish stores because they didn't have anything to eat. And it was a big deal. Otters were being killed because of the lack of fish. So with climate change will come more of those issues. And we see them playing out for sure.
You guys have any other questions?
So besides the kind of, I guess, like general science that a lot of these degrees lead you into before conservation. What would be your recommendation for experience or coursework in college to kind of prepare you? Because I would like to work in conservation in the sense of connecting communities and the natural resources as well. So what do you think would be your biggest recommendation for kind of setting that up?
Yeah, that's awesome. Allie, one of the girls on our board, she actually participated in a what was her class that she went through, Bridget? It
Project
was-
Dragonfly, it's University of Miami Online. They have a master's program. It's really awesome. After you're done with you guys are all undergrad? Yeah. Well, after you're done with your undergrad, I highly suggest it if you're looking into getting your master's, because it is way more focused on going out and doing projects in the field. So you do your coursework and then you go on several different trips. And so one of the trips that she went on was actually going to Guyana, which is how she came into with us later down the line. But I had another friend who went through that project and she was doing things with whale sharks. It's really good program for getting hands-on in the field, doing projects, and you get a master's degree out of it. But for me, I would suggest, it depends on what type of area you want to go into, but volunteer for anything. And just be like, hey, I'd like to help that. I'd like to jump in here. And then volunteer, intern. And then you're going to make connections along the way. I met Christina through people at a otter keeper workshop because I was talking about all these big things I want to do with giant otter conservation. And I can't believe there's no projects out there supporting giant otters. Like, oh, you sound like my friend Christina. We need to get you guys in touch with one another because you guys want to do the same exact thing. So you never know who's going to lead you to that person. So you need by all means, that work that you're doing right now in biology and learning as much as you can about it. And then 2, volunteer, even right now while you're in school, in as many different types of places as you can. And then make friends. Don't be afraid to talk to people because you never know who's got the same ideas that you have and where it's going to lead you.
I would say stay involved locally too. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. It feels like conservation is so global, but then I really feel like working locally within smaller chapters of either conservation groups, civic organizations, social justice groups, just gives you that foundation of connecting to your community and learning a different lifestyle outside of your own and getting to know different worldviews, and just make your experience with your education as holistic as possible. Don't limit it to just biology and just science. Get out there and really dig deeper into, the bigger social issues that are obviously going on everywhere.
Yeah, and I think something that I touched on in the very beginning, I didn't realize how much politics was in conservation when I was in college. And I wish I would have paid a little bit more attention to that kind of side of different things. And okay, I want to make all this change, but how does that change actually happen? And who's voting for these things? And what legislation needs to get through? It's a lot of that, which is not my forte, but it's definitely worth paying attention to.
And I would say push yourself to be uncomfortable with just uncomfortable discussions. I wish somebody in college would have told me about, being a white savior and the perception that people of other countries and other cultures are going to have when this white girl steps into their community and says, hey, I'm here to save you all. It's just, I really wish I could just retroactively go back and know everything that I know now. No White Saviors is a good Instagram feed to follow. They're no bullshit. It's tough. It's hard stuff to digest and swallow, but it really has helped me just question, like we said before, question every single move that we make in the field. So yeah, just follow different groups on social media and just read and listen to the discussions people are having in those threads. Even if you're like, oh, well, that's not me, they're just being terrible. It is stuff that I think we all need to hear when we're doing any kind of work outside of, the US in different countries. So
And a thick skin with that too.
yeah, we've been through quite a lot. We've had the government of Guyana pretty much try to silence us because of our advocacy against the wildlife trade. So, but we just stay true to our mission. That's all you can do is stay positive and stay true to what you're actually trying to do in the field, and don't get bogged down in all BS. And hopefully it all works out in the end.
I think that's a big one that you just said is stay positive, because it's really easy in the scientific field to just like look at all of the negatives and say, oh, wow, this is piling up. It's a lot. But if you stay positive and you're looking at that as, okay, this is just one problem to solve now, and then we'll move on to the next problem to solve, and just keep looking for solutions and keep looking for answers and staying positive and optimistic. Otherwise, it's easy to have like burnout later in your career and fatigue and just say, I'm one person. How am I going to make this change? Like, I'm one small, tiny person. The problem's too big. It's not. You just got to build your team around you, stay positive, and keep going.
Yeah, and we kind of flipped that narrative a while back. It is easy with the doom and gloom, and like gold mining is coming in. There's big agriculture coming in. It just seems futile. But to that village that we work in, we're like everything to them. We've proven to be dependable and shown up for them, and we do make a difference in just a handful of lives. And in the end, maybe that's enough. If you can't conquer the bigger issue, then look to where you can make an impact with, especially with the youth and the kids, is where we have found like our impact is huge. So
yeah, and they're the ones making the decisions for the next and the future. So definitely don't skip over the kids. The kids are the ones really absorbing and soaking in all that information, and they're going to be the ones retaining that later on. So I don't know about you guys, but I grew up in like marine biology camp and like all this other different fun stuff. And it stuck with me throughout my whole career, and it shaped the person I am now. And just what you're doing right now, being a part of a conservation society while you're in school. Awesome. You're already in a really good track.
okay.
Hello, kitten.
All right, does anybody have any? I know you guys probably have to wrap, but we want to answer any questions that you guys might have. So
It doesn't look like we have any questions, and we are about ready to wrap up. But did you want to provide just like your website and another reminder of how people can reach you?
Yeah, our website is savethegiants.org. But find us on Facebook. We're Save the Giant Otters. There's a Save the Giants that's like a large dog
it's
breed
dog.
rescue. People get confused. We're the ones with pictures of otters, not the dogs. And feel free to email us. It's either Bridget or Christina at savethegiants.org. And we are happy to answer questions whenever, about whatever, even if you're just wanting to reach out and be like, hey, let me know when you're going to go in the field again. Like things like that, or like, hey, I maybe want to be your intern. Can I please go live in the field for a year?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for presenting. This is a really interesting presentation, and it looks like everyone really enjoyed it too.
Yay. And just love otters. Like it's that easy. Just love otters. It's all good.
Well, have a great night, everyone.
All right.
Thanks, you guys.
Coming in.
Bye.